Fantastic Beasts, the second movie, is now titled The Crimes of Grindelwald. And today I want to share with you my thoughts about this second movie in this prequel series. Because in case you're not familiar with the first Fantastic Beasts movie, these are prequels to the famous Harry Potter saga. Now, I just assume that you're familiar with that. This takes place many, many years before Hogwarts, before the story that we know and love. And so Fantastic Beasts tells the story of this somewhat strange wizard, Newt, Newt Scamander, who is an expert when it comes to, let's say, these magical creatures that roam the earth. Without us, muggles or no-mash, as they're called in the United States, we don't know these fantastic creatures. We cannot perceive them, but for the wizards, they're very familiar with them. And so Newt Scamander is, you could say, almost like a caretaker of these fantastical creatures. The movies that that are unfolding right now. So we've had a first movie, and then we'll have 4 more movies. J.K. Rowling is a scriptwriter, but there is not a book series. This is very different from Harry Potter, where the books had already been written, or at least partially, and then they started to turn them into movies. So every time a movie came out, we already knew the story. The exciting thing about Fantastic Beasts is that we don't know. Nobody knows the story. Only J.K. Rowling. And so the first movie was definitely felt like the Harry Potter universe, and yet it was also very different. This is not about children going to school and learning how to become a wizard. This was different. There's definitely a lot of allegory going on, and kind of these stories are also stories about our world, the world in which we live, and how we treat each other, and how we treat the world around us. But different vibe, different story, and yet there are a lot of the familiar themes of that are also part of the Harry Potter saga, like betrayal and the choice between good and bad, or good and evil, and how fighting evil, trust, don't judge people on their appearances, all that stuff that I think made Harry Potter much more than just a fairy tale, are also part of this saga. But we're less familiar with the main characters. And so one of the questions that I had after seeing the first movie of Fantastic Beasts is, who of the characters that we've seen in this movie will return in the next one? Or are they going to completely reboot it? Are we going to see another story of Newt Scamander in a different part of the world, introducing all sorts of new supporting actors? And you kind of got attached to some of the characters of the first movie. So now we know at least a little bit more, because last week we finally saw the first photo of the cast of the second movie. And again, some familiar characters, some people that we know from the Harry Potter saga, and some completely new characters. By the way, I forgot to tell you that the idea of Fantastic Beasts and where to find them is based on one book, a small book that J.K. Rowling wrote many years ago for charity. And was supposed to be kind of this book that they used on Hogwarts to teach the pupils, the apprentices, about these magical creatures and how to handle them. But Newt Scamander supposedly was the teacher at Hogwarts who wrote this book and who taught this to the children that were enrolled there. But we don't know anything about the story. So what I want to do now is to go over this photo that we've seen, and I love what they did. It was actually supposed to be not just a revelation of the cast and who is going to be in this second movie, but it's also going to be the reveal of the title. And so if you click on that movie, and I'm sure if you're a Harry Potter fan, you've already done that, first you see just a static photo. And then it starts to blur a little bit, and it starts moving, just like the magical paintings at Hogwarts. And there you see a little bit of dust, and then all of a sudden you see the reveal of the title. And I already said this. It's called The Crimes of Grindelwald. Now, who is Grindelwald? Grindelwald is an evil wizard. He used to be a friend of Dumbledore. Actually, one of the more controversial things that J.K. Rowling mentioned after she had written all the books of the Harry Potter saga was there was even kind of a romantic relationship between Dumbledore and Grindelwald. When they were very, very young, they were these two friends that wanted to revolutionize the wizarding world. They wanted to, like, the wizarding world had become a little bit complacent, a bit akin to what happens in the Star Wars saga with the Jedi. You know, it's like everybody takes the Jedi for granted. Even themselves, they take themselves for granted. And so in the wizarding world, there's a similar thing. It has to be dusted off, and Grindelwald and Dumbledore want to be kind of the leaders of that revolution. However, Dumbledore soon discovers that Grindelwald has a very different angle. He is very hostile towards anyone who is not part of his club of pure-blood wizards. And so you see a lot of that kind of Nazi ideology also in Grindelwald's thinking. And bit by bit, at first, Dumbledore is very enamored by the idea of being, you know, one of those innovators. And then bit by bit, he starts to wake up and he starts to realize that, wait a minute, this is someone I cannot go along with. And there's this duel that happens. And this is mild spoilers if you haven't read Harry Potter, but there is a duel that takes place between Grindelwald and Dumbledore. This is something that we may see in one of the future movies. I don't know. It's not shown in Harry Potter. Well, actually, I don't think that we'll see it in Fantastic Beasts, because Grindelwald in this movie is a lot older. So is it, or is he? No. Wait a minute. No. The duel is still in the future. But anyway, during this duel between Grindelwald and Dumbledore, which is kind of the basis of their fallout, Dumbledore's sister gets killed. So she is collateral damage. And Dumbledore has felt guilty about that for the rest of his life, understandably. And so this movie, bearing the title The Crimes of Grindelwald, really ups the stakes. This is interesting. This is about a main villain, a dark wizard, and you need a good bad guy for a good story. And then, of course, if you have Grindelwald, you need to have Dumbledore in the story, and that's where the photo begins. On the left, we see the young Dumbledore, and Dumbledore that we know in the existing Harry Potter saga always was wearing these kind of oriental garbs and very ornate and very peculiar. In this photo, he's almost modern. He has this blue raincoat, or it looks like a thick coat. He's got, you know, leather shoes, and that's it. His beard is still not very long, and so he's played by Jude Law, which is also a very interesting choice as an actor, a very charismatic actor. But as someone who has a big range, I think, and also has some gravitas. So I think it's a good choice. There's really nothing to say about this photo, except for the fact that Dumbledore is carrying a wand, and the top of the wand is lit. So all the wands in the photo have this kind of blue radiation coming from the tip of it. So that it's magic. It's magic. But it's interesting to see that he's got his wand. So this is not an origin story of Dumbledore. He already is an established wizard. And then we get another character that we know from the first Fantastic Beasts movie. Credence, I think is his name. And what's interesting is that Credence is played by Ezra Miller. And if that name rings a bell, you may have seen the latest DC movie, Justice League, because Ezra Miller plays, I think, the best character in the Justice League, the Flash. But in Fantastic Beasts, the first movie, he played this very conflicted, very damaged wizard boy who seems to be unable to control his powers, and who is kind of on the verge of going to the dark side. And so it's kind of interesting to see. He turns out to be not the bad guy in the first movie, spoiler, but we don't really know what's going to happen to him in this story. Something tells me that he's probably going to be more on the side of the heroes. But because he's so damaged, he's also very vulnerable. Now, to his left and our right is a new character, played by Claudia Kim. However, her character doesn't have a name yet. We don't know what her name is. However, there is something that we know and that we can deduce from the photo. She seems to be enamored with Credence. She's hunched over him. Or perhaps she's comforting him or supporting him. I don't know. But there seems to be a bond between these two. And there could be a deeper bond in the sense that she too is damaged. She is not a happy wizard. Quite on the contrary, we know from the little blurb that accompanied the presentation of the second movie that she is cursed. She is actually a creature. She's a person that is part of the. She's a maledictus. Of course, that's Latin from maledicere, to say bad things, but can also mean to be cursed. And so she's a maledictus. What does it mean? In her case, it means that she has been cursed, and she will eventually turn into a monster. So that curse transforms her into a monster. Now that's the first thing that we know. The second thing that we know, and this is more speculation, is that she may actually be part of the Circus Arcanus, which is a traveling museum of human oddities. And we've seen a poster that announced this traveling circus in the first Fantastic Beasts movie. There are some movie stills that show you a picture of that circus coming to town, and it's kind of a bit what they did in the beginning of the last century, where sometimes on fairs or in circuses you would see these strange people with deformities and everything, and they were put on display as these creeps and freaks and whatnot. Well, apparently she is part of that circus, and there is a picture in the still from the first movie that shows the snake girl, and that's where it gets interesting. You see this girl, and she's like transforming into a whole bunch of snakes, like a Medusa. And we know that this curse is irreversible. So she's in big, big trouble. And of course, the serpents are very important later on in the Harry Potter saga. So could there be a link? It's very, very interesting. And I'll come back to this because I think there may also be a link with Grindelwald. But let's first take a look at the rest of the picture. There's some characters that we have already seen. Let's see. There is Aleta Lestrange, played by Zoe Kravitz. Used to be Newt's girlfriend. However, his heart was broken because she gave her heart to someone else. And that someone else is the person sitting next to her, which is Newt's brother. And his name is Theseus Scamander, Scamander, I think it's Scamander, played by Callum Turner. So he's Newt's brother, but he's a very different kind of guy. Newt is a little bit, he's reclusive, a bit introverted, definitely not comfortable in social surroundings. Whereas his brother is almost the opposite. He's a war hero. He works as an auror. So he's someone who is always kind of upholding the law of the wizards. And so he's like a police officer. He's a hero. And so apparently there's this love triangle between Leta and then the two brothers, Theseus and Newt. I hope I pronounced these names correctly. The thing that makes this interesting, this triangle interesting, is that, of course, the last name of the character played by Zoe Kravitz is Lestrange. And we know that that means bad things later on in the Harry Potter saga. So is she actually turning these brothers to the dark side? Is there may be more going on here in the background? So interesting. You can already feel that there is definitely potential for a good story there. And then behind Theseus is Porpentina, that we also know from the first movie, played by Kathleen Waterston. And then next to her, Newt Scamander, played by Eddie Redmayne. Still looking exactly the same as in the first movie. I personally hope that this character will evolve a little bit, because he was very weird in the first movie. There's almost like a disconnect between him and the audience, because he was never really looking at people. That may be done on purpose, but it made it more difficult to empathize with him. And I think that he's supposed to be the hero of the story. So I hope that he will be a little bit less disconnected from the world around him. But then again, it could be part of the character arc. We don't know that. Only J.K. Rowling knows. So anyway, that is Newt. And then next to Newt is a character that I loved in the first movie. Definitely the comedic factor. And it's Jacob, played by Dan Fogler. A great role, comic relief, just such a nice guy. And he's the only non-wizard in the first movie, but also in the second one, apparently. So he's a no-mash, as they say in the US. And it kind of makes him a fish out of the water in this world of wizards. But he seems to adapt quite well. So it's great to see him back. This is actually one of the characters that I was afraid that we were going to lose, that they would completely ditch him and we would never see him again. Fortunately, he's part of the team again. And then next to Jacob is Queenie, played by Alison Sudol or Sudol. And also Queenie, of course, we know her from the first movie as well. So it's great to have at least a bit of continuity so that we can start building a bond with these characters. And then, of course, the most important character in this photo is Gellert Grindelwald, who is in the title. You know, this is about the Crimes of Grindelwald. And we've seen Grindelwald before in some flashbacks, and we've seen a younger version. There's also at the end of the first Fantastic Beasts movie, just a revelation of Grindelwald, who actually had a different appearance throughout the first movie, and then at the end turns out that was a disguise, and he's actually played by Johnny Depp. He's carrying also, just like Dumbledore, he's carrying a wand, and if you look closely, it is not just a wand. It is the Elder Wand, the most powerful, the most important wand, and plays a massive role in the Harry Potter saga later on. So he has that wand, and that wand, of course, gives him tremendous power. It's interesting to see his appearance. He's got this kind of like almost punk hair, white hair, very nonchalant, looks a bit like a pirate, which for Johnny Depp is probably not entirely something new to him. As I mentioned before, he's one of the most dangerous dark wizards of all time. He got his education not at Hogwarts, but at Durmstrang. We've seen the Durmstrang Institute also in one of the Harry Potter movies. These are tough guys, but he was expelled even from that school because he was conducting all these weird, strange, dangerous experiments. And so there was a lot of interest in the dark magic. And so he got expelled. And then, of course, kind of taught himself lots of other bad stuff. And so there was a bit of a controversy about Johnny Depp playing him, because Johnny Depp, at the time that they were starting to film this, and they've already been filming probably most of the movie. They started in June during the summertime. Johnny Depp was in the news because he had mistreated his wife, I think, or girlfriend or fiancée, I'm not sure. But there was domestic violence involved, and so a lot of fans were upset. Well, why would you give this important role to Johnny Depp? Again, it's like real life and the world of acting, kind of like how can you distinguish, how can you separate the actor from the role that he plays? In this case, at least he's playing a bad guy, a very bad guy. So that kind of matches that somewhat upsetting news. We'll see. The reason that they wanted Johnny Depp, and J.K. Rowling has explained this also to the fans, she said they needed someone who had a massive screen presence. They needed someone who was very charismatic. And Johnny Depp just seemed to be the right guy for the job, and apparently has done great acting work in giving this Grindelwald his own style and his own, that's what Johnny Depp does so well as an actor. He can create these weird, menacing, strange roles and characters, and they needed something like that for Grindelwald. So J.K. Rowling's very positive about the work that Johnny Depp did. But I can also understand the fans that are a little bit upset about this. So, all in all, very interesting photo. Says actually much more than you'd think of just a cast photo. And there is, again, in the backstory of these characters and the little that we know about their internal relationships, there's a lot of material for a great story. And if there's one thing that J.K. Rowling does really well, is telling great stories. So I can't wait to see more.